This is the Microcast from Microcosm Coaching. We encourage athletes of all ages, backgrounds, and ability levels to take small steps towards big dreams. Start small, dream big, and get matched today with a Microcosm coach by scheduling a free consultation call. Whether you're running your first 5K or 10th 100 miler, our team of certified coaches can help you reach your athletic goals. Visit us at microcosm-coaching.com to learn more and take a small step towards your big dreams today.
Hi, Zoe.
Hey,
we're back.
Welcome to the Microcast. Today, we're going to play Would You Rather. Then we're going to talk about how to zoom out and detect patterns in your training. So I think a lot of people really, especially after our conversations about data, people get so caught up in the nitty gritty, which is important and is something we always want to keep an eye trained on. But that's only useful if you know how to implement that information and if you know how to zoom out and actually detect patterns and really learn how to decipher the signal and the noise of your training. So we're going to talk about that a lot today.
Great.
And we're going to get into the nitty gritty of how all runners can and should integrate strength training, particularly on how to periodize strength training. So I think that's something about strength training that runners often get wrong is they just do the same thing, or they think they have to only lift heavy and they do the exact same thing all year long. And just like we periodize our endurance training, you have to do the same thing with strength if you want to reach peak performance at certain times. And if you want to build endurance, build energy, or energy resilience, all of those are distinct things that need distinct periodizations and exercises to improve. So we're going to talk about how to really break that down and present a framework for athletes to implement their own strength training.
Nice. I love that. I love having those tangible takeaways. All right.
So we're not doing a hot or not this week
what's up with
because
that?
I fully can't think of anything else. I think we have talked about everything on planet Earth at least twice. And I know that's not possible. So for the love of God, if someone wants to send us some hot or not topics,
please.
I would love to not just turn every episode into me ranting against the ketogenic diet or barefoot shoes. Which, I mean, I'm happy to do that. Let me cook, you know.
Barefoot running, hot or not.
Oh my God, I can't do it.
Come on, it's an easy layup.
In that realm, we're going to play Would You Rather.
Okay.
And hopefully this can be a little bit of fun and a lot of bit informative. But TJ, would you rather run a marathon on the road in trail shoes or run a semi-technical trail marathon in road shoes?
In carbon road shoes?
I didn't specify.
Ooh, without that specification.
I would say any road shoes you want.
I would, for my health and well-being long-term as an athlete, I would rather run a marathon on the roads in trail shoes than be on any technical trail.
Semi-technical.
Semi-technical.
Didn't you run the Collegiate Peaks race in road shoes?
Yes.
So you've literally done this.
Well,
I'm just going to call you out.
Semi-technical.
You wore carbon shoes in that. You wore carbon road shoes for that trail, or nylon-plated trail shoe.
Non-technical. No, I wore the carbon version.
I would call that semi-technical.
Really?
There's a little, yeah.
We should define our terms here.
It's like a little techie.
Okay. I'm still going to go. That was a dumb decision. I'm still going to go marathon on the road with trail shoes.
No, I'm going road shoes in a trail marathon.
That's a broken ankle. That's a hospital.
No, I mean, I've done it before. I've definitely done this. I'll do it again.
Semi-technical. It's a lot of rock.
Would you rather fuel your next 50K only with snacks found at aid stations or only with Spring energy gels?
Spring energy gel, pre or post Spring energy gate.
Now that we know what we know.
What's worse? What gels are worse?
I would still do Spring Energy because now we know how much is in it, so I would only have to eat like 8 an hour and I'd be fine.
Okay, aid station snacks, does that include like the gels that they have there?
No, it's like trail mix, M&Ms, pretzels, chips, Oreos.
Oh my God,
pickles.
What are you doing? What kind of question is this? I'm going to go Spring Energy because I think at least I know what's in there.
Yeah. Same. I mean, I've done it before.
Right. Yes.
It's not the ideal, but I guess I could do it again.
Those races, I was getting a lot less carbohydrate per hour.
Would you rather race a 25K on the trails without socks or a hot 50K with no ice?
We're talking like 100-degree
Yeah,
temps.
100 degrees.
I'd. Ooh.
I'd go no ice.
Oh God. I think I'm a no. I would go no ice because I don't even like go out to the store without socks in my shoes. That
Actually,
just
yeah, you
feels
wear
so
socks
gross.
with your sandal. I don't
Yeah.
know that I've ever seen you in bare feet.
Okay, I
Do you
got.
take them off in the shower? Actually, you are barefooted right now.
Yeah, but I don't like to wear shoes without socks. It just feels weird.
Yeah.
It's nasty. So
I mean,
forget running like that.
Yeah, I actually had someone when I was asking like, "What's the best advice for the Leadville 100?" They were like, "Do all your training runs without socks." And I was like, "Thank you for your input. I will not be doing that
Please,
at all.
please, nobody out there listening
You don't
to this
need to train
podcast,
your foot skin.
Do not
Don't
do that. Do not do that.
Ugh. All right. Would you rather coach someone who did half the volume you prescribed or did twice as much volume as you prescribed?
You really
This is such a cursed
wanted
question.
to get me upset with this one.
As soon as I wrote it, I was like, I hate myself.
Oh God. Okay. Wow. Ugh.
I know.
I would go half the volume because
I think I would too, because at least they wouldn't like one day email me with like, oh, by the way, I have a labrum tear and like chronic endocrine disruption. They would just be like a little undercooked.
twice as much. Thank God I've had some people who are they aim a little higher than they need to, but never double the prescription.
Yeah, don't double. That'd be tough. I've definitely like and this is the thing I always tell athletes is like, I would always rather you be healthy and underprepared than overprepared and unhealthy.
Yeah.
So I stand by that. Ideally, we want to be healthy
Yep.
and prepared. That's the ideal. But if you're overcooked, doesn't matter how much training you've done because you're fucked.
Yeah,
So
totally.
you don't want to overcook it. All right. Would you rather never strength train or never heat train? And I would say heat like sauna, bath.
Just a trick question for me.
Like you can still run in the heat.
I could still run in the heat.
Yeah. But you can't do like intentional like outside of the running heat training.
I would rather never heat train because at this point, being in a 38-year-old body, if I don't start to get my game together with my strength training.
You started strength training consistently for the first time like ever.
Yeah.
How's that going?
I mean, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it a little later.
Cool, okay.
I've been strength training. I haven't been doing periodized strength training.
Right.
So there is a pretty big difference between strength training and periodized strength training.
Right. It's like a difference between running and training.
Running with a plan and running
Yeah.
without a plan.
Just vibing.
I love to just vibe my strength training. No, seriously, strength training is very important. I'm trying to get my level of commitment in that area up to where every other commitment is for me. And heat training, it just doesn't, it's fucking hard. It doesn't
is
bring me
hard.
joy. I hate being
Yeah.
in a sauna.
I feel like if we had a hot tub, I would feel differently.
Okay, hot tub is happy place. Sauna is bad place for
Yeah.
me.
I actually like both. I like being hot.
Ugh, you're weird.
I know. Well, from the South. All right. Would you rather give up Strava or throw away your GPS watch? I would throw away my GPS watch because, like,
Wow.
then I could still manually input my information to Strava. I could put it in Training Peaks, and hopefully, like, my
can't.
coach
You
would
can't.
just like
How would you
assess.
How would you manually get your information? Are you going to use
I would be like-
Strava?
I ran.
No, you have no GPS watch in this scenario. You don't cheat.
I need Strava because where else am I going to make jokes?
Where else are you going to get your?
Validation.
There we go.
Therapy is expensive. Strava is only $70.
Yeah, $70 a year, and it's all the therapy I need.
Yeah. I wonder if it takes HSA payments.
I'm going to go with I'll be fine giving up Strava. I do like to see my friends out there doing great things and throw kudos around, but tracking my training accurately is really important to me.
I guess accuracy is cool, but have you ever been validated by strangers?
Yes. And I've gone down those rabbit holes, and it doesn't lead anywhere good for me.
Straight up, I don't know if this person listens to the podcast. Out of nowhere, I had a stranger comment on one of my runs on Strava that I was their number one inspiration, and they named their dog after me.
Wow.
Yeah.
You'd never know that if you weren't on Strava.
Exactly. And that's critical because hopefully that doesn't have to end up in an evidence locker someday.
I guess Strava has reasonably accurate
Yeah.
GPS tracking.
Mostly, I just need an outlet for like GPS related comedy. All right, last one. Would you rather never listen to music while running or only be able to listen to one album while running for the rest of your life?
And every single run, you have to have that album on.
Yes.
Oh my God.
I know.
Wow. What's your answer?
I would go only one album, and I would
Taylor
happily listen to Charlie XCX's Brat.
I have no idea what that is.
It's that green album.
A green album?
Bumpin' That.
Bumping that what?
Bumpin' That. That's the album.
Bumping that?
That's one of the lyrics.
Bumping that?
I play it all the time when you're in the car.
Do I like it?
Once you said this is weird, and once you said you liked it.
Oh, progress.
So mixed reviews.
Mixed reviews. I don't know. So that would be your album?
Yeah.
I guess.
Although once I did a 50-mile race and I was using like a little MP3 player and I had like fucked up how I synced it so that all it had was Fleetwood Mac's Rumors and a Sufjan Stevens album for like 8+ hours of running.
Not good.
That was a weird fucking day in the desert.
One of my toughest runs, I got stuck with just an Arcade Fire album on my shuffle for some reason. And it wasn't the right vibe for the race.
No, that's a very weird
and
race
so
vibe.
I definitely ran worse.
Yeah.
I had to take it off in order to run better. So the moral of the story is if you have to, would you rather?
Yeah.
Just go without
But you can
music.
pick the album.
Just go without music.
Whatever. Charlie XCX rules.
Okay.
All right. So this is a question from an athlete, not one that we coach, but just a podcast listener. Sometimes I struggle to zoom out and see the bigger picture in my training, especially with so much data. Sometimes I feel really overwhelmed and I wonder how to know if I'm actually getting better. What should I be looking for when I zoom out to analyze my training?
Woo, what should I be looking for when I zoom out?
So
let's talk about what zooming out is.
Let's zoom out on zooming out. So to me, zooming out means looking at your training through the lens of several months and not several days. Like, it's very normal to have dips and declines, temporary regressions, or like just a shitty day every so often in your training. And often I can tell how new someone is to running with like how hung up they get on a bad day or even a good day. I feel like the longer you're at it, you'll have like a great run and you're like, fine, and you'll have the worst run of your life and you're like, also fine, doesn't matter because I've done this for 3,000 days. So what really matters most are the trends over these longer periods of time, and this is an area where it's so important to keep a training log that has all of this important information in it. Ideally, I'd say 2 years of data is the most helpful, but you're still going to be able to get a lot of really good information if you just have like 6 months of training data. So 6 months is great. Using something like Training Peaks, like Strava, also great. However you track your training, ideally being able to like actually have some numbers and some ability to sort information, which is why I like to use Training Peaks in this instance.
Yeah, and like zooming out is just really the act of understanding where your attention is. And so like, am I here in today's training in this interval, in the exact split I'm running at, on my 1 minute on, 1 minute off? Like, you can go so far in, like right to that very stride, or you could be as zoomed out as like, my vision is in 10 years to do X, Y, and Z. And here's like the roadmap that I've created to get there.
Yeah.
And then you zoom in a little bit. What do I need to do in 5 years? What do I need to do in 3 years? What do I need to do in 18 months? What do I need to do in 1 year? And you kind of have those thin slices as you get a little more zoomed in and a little bit more zoomed in. And what's my plan today?
Yeah.
And I think it's critical for athletes to be able to kind of oscillate between those zooms. Mm-hmm. Like, am I in the 30,000 foot zoom looking out at the next 3 to 5 years of my athletic career? Or am I like in like the suffering and the adversity of today's training, which isn't going well for me? It's a hard day.
Or even on the flip side, if it's good.
Right. Totally. Absolutely. But I think, to be fair, we typically advise athletes to zoom out when they are struggling with the adversity and the challenge that they're coping with now. And so zooming out is a very effective tool to develop for athletes and understanding the context in which they're doing their training.
Yep.
And that, like you said, no one workout is so important. It's the culmination of all of those workouts over whatever the duration of time is that you're involved in this process.
Yeah.
That really matters.
So I think something that coaches often will hear is an athlete will say like, oh, I don't do well at XYZ training. Like I don't do well at interval training, or I'm not good on the climbs, or I'm bad at technical downhill running. So like they identify some component of training that they have a weakness in. And I think the biggest mistake that athletes make is they incorporate the training they hate most and have the least propensity to adapt to right before a critical race. Don't do that, right? Like if you've signed up for like a steep 50K, the wrong time to start focusing on climbing is like right before to start panic training that.
Right.
You want to be focusing on weaknesses further out from your key event, and you want to be training strengths closer to it. So the biggest value of really being able to step back and take this broad look at your training is find out when you're training well, when you're not training quite as well, and what themes you can pick up on over long periods of time, and work with your coach is doing this. You guys can be doing this in concert to better create like a training structure like on the course of a year or a cycle that supports that.
Just talking about something very similar to this with an athlete who consistency over the course of the last year has been really up and down.
Yeah.
And so I was asking him to reflect on, when were you most consistent in your training? Okay, it was this 3-month period where I was training for this specific race. And I was like, okay, and at what periods are you at least consistent? Oh, it's when I don't have a goal in mind. Okay, well, that's a pretty classic scenario, honestly, but an important insight. Like, I'm most consistent when I have something urgent that I'm working towards.
Right.
I'm least consistent when I don't. And so there's the pattern.
I guess my advice would be reconceive of how you view of having a goal on the schedule.
Absolutely. No, that's exactly, what we did. It's like, okay, what's your goal for next year? X, Y, and Z. But how do I stay consistent for 12 months? Because that's
then
a goal
you're
in
only
10 months.
ever panic training.
Correct. Well, break that goal down and have more intermediary goals so it always feels like there's something urgent to work towards. So there's other patterns that you can see. Like, for example, I don't perform well when I do what feels like a gray area run before my workout day. I perform better when I do a recovery day before my workout day. Like, that's a pattern that I noticed in my training over the last 6 or 7 years. Took me a little while to notice that. I do better if I don't double. Like, that's a recent pattern that I've discovered. Like, doubles are more like stress than I need. Like, better to just run for 2 hours than to run for 90 minutes and try to run again later.
Yeah.
Patterns. They can dictate behavior and help you improve. But you don't necessarily see those things if you're not logging, like you said, in a training log, if you're not keeping track.
You gotta train enough to accumulate data. Step 1.
If you're not training.
Accumulate that data. Right. Step 2, track the data. Step 3, detect patterns. Step 4, implement learnings from those patterns.
And I think one of the primary things that we always advocate for at Microcosm is athletes check into their training log every day.
Yeah.
Like, we don't consider...
That was a big... So I wanted to touch on this point here of like how I use subjective data and why it's so important for athletes to make notes on every single run is because I do use that as a coach. Like, I promise it's not just because of the warm fuzzies I get from making you take the extra 30 to 90 seconds to tell me if you felt good or felt tired or whatever. It's not busy work. It is like how I design training, for the love of Christ. Please use your training logs, everyone.
Right.
So we react to training with very similar patterns and outcomes year after year after year, right? Like it's never exactly the same, but it's always similar. So something that I always like to say is that your training never repeats, but it always rhymes. So thinking of how that reacts with subjective feedback is a much actually better measurement of, or is a much better performance indicator than any of the objective metrics like pace, NGP, Strava segments, anything like that. So as a coach, a lot of times what I'll do is like a keyword search in Training Peaks. So using the notes that athletes leave when they leave notes, like I felt tired, or I felt under recovered, or I felt great, or like I nailed my threshold, things like that. So I can see patterns and notice when they feel good or when they feel tired. For example, I can see if an athlete is adapting particularly well to maybe threshold work, or if we need to bring down their overall training volume even more to support better VO2 max development, things like that. So that's why it's so important that people leave that subjective feedback, is because it like helps when I pair that with the data of like, I felt good. Oh, great. Like, I use that macro data, and it's important that we do that consistently because that makes the data even better and more useful. So when you identify these patterns, they're only useful if you put them into action. So
Well, let's just take the inverse relationship between that subjective data and the coach, and let's turn it on the athlete for a second, because they're part of the relationship. It's a 50-50 relationship between the coach and the athlete. The process of leaving feedback is not solely for the coach. And I would say it's 50% at least as important for the athlete, because if the athlete has zero awareness, they can't change a damn thing.
Right.
So you need to go through the process of leaving that feedback for yourself.
Yeah.
So you can also be responsible for your part of figuring out where these patterns lie. Because what's specific to the athlete is that you're the one feeling your feelings, feeling how the run goes, feeling the progress, feeling the workouts get better or not, feeling more competent or not. The coach is only interpreting the signs and signals that they get from the athlete and doesn't live in the athlete's experience in their body, any of that.
But it can be really important to have that objective third party to chat with, because often I'll have athletes that tell, like, again, thinking of weaknesses, that tell a story of like, I'll never be able to run more than 30 miles in a week. If I run 5 times in a week, I'll get injured. And I'm like, well, maybe you right now that could be true, but training elementally changes us. Like, you now is not the same as you after doing 4 weeks of building volume, you know, or 4 weeks of maintaining volume and adding in specific strength training, or you plus strength training plus dietary changes. Like, you isn't you. So I think it's always useful to have a coach to offer that check on, like, is this, let's make sure that we're looking at signals and we're not only telling ourselves a story too.
Absolutely.
Because your capacity is always changing and evolving.
Well, and then that's where, you get the subjectivity of that. You get that subjective feedback, and then you also get to couple that with the data and the analysis, because then, you have the coach who's like, well, actually, I see these things. How do you feel about me reflecting a different perspective towards you? We know a lot of athletes have stories and beliefs that don't actually support the outcomes that they want to create. And so a way of working with that is showing a different reality. And you need to have the hard evidence and the data that supports that. It's not just like making something up, it's having real evidence to support it, because that's what builds self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to do hard things and to grow. It doesn't come from nowhere. We can't just conjure these things up out of thin air. And again, it goes back to the athlete, So it is like, there's always that like back and forth. Coach is zooming out, athlete zooming in, athlete zooming out, coach is zooming in. Maybe we're both zooming out together, creating a plan for the future and how we're going to get somewhere. Maybe we are zooming in together to look at a workout that didn't go right, or a race that didn't, an athlete didn't feel well tapered for, or something. I mean, because there's just so many things that you can change and tweak when you're seeing these patterns and building the awareness. It's really one of the most fun parts about this process as an athlete or a coach.
Charts. I love charts.
Oh,
Love a
training
good
peak
chart.
charts. Ooh, I love
Amazing.
it.
But also, again, that's why I like having face-to-face conversations with
Yeah.
athletes, is because chart plus conversation equals unstoppable. So I think the big takeaways here are to look at big patterns and pictures and determine when you're running well, when you're not, and
Yep.
why that might be. I think it's important to look at both the subjective and the objective feedback to see if some of these rhyming patterns exist. Then take what you have learned and design training. Ideally, your coach is doing this and you guys are collaborating on this. Design your training to progress from weaknesses to strengths. This will help keep you in the habit of doing the work that's the most productive at the right time. Like for me, I would say VO2 max, like top end speed is an area of weakness, which is what I'm working on right now when I'm far away from my race season. It's not specific. It's an area of weakness. I'm pretty fresh and well rested after taking, some like recovering from Leadville, so I'm more able to adapt to that work and I'm more able to sustain the volume that I need to train these weaknesses of mine.
Right. Yeah.
So that keeps you in the habit of doing the work that's really productive for you when it's the most productive and avoiding mistakes from phase to phase when races approach.
It's so fun to think about just all the possibilities when you actually have a couple years of hard data.
Yeah.
Man, I've gotten to make such important to me changes in my personal training approach as a result of really zooming out and looking at some of those patterns, what's really working, what's not, and seeing that like just over the course of a few months play out in some pretty tangible gains is a powerful thing. If you give yourself a long enough runway, and you're mindful that these things do exist, it can have really powerful impacts. I think, at least for me, and something that I want to reiterate to everybody is that give yourself that time.
Yeah.
Because that time really helps you refine things.
Yep.
And it just gets better and better. So strength training, everyone's favorite topic.
People love strength training, and I love to argue with people about strength training.
We probably have had a few butting of the heads on this podcast.
I'd say you and I are fairly in alignment.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. Oh, we'll see. We'll see. I'm coming around, I
Yeah.
think, to where you have been. You are a prolific strength trainer. I'm
also
not.
now a certified strength coach,
Yeah.
which was really important to me because I have seen the value of strength training in my own training and want to provide that for athletes, and love when athletes, like if they have someone in their life that also is like has some continuing education, has some expertise in this area, working with someone who understands training runners, because so often, even when I've referred people out to other people, I'll like ask them what they're doing in their strength training. I'm like, wait, does this person know that you're training for a marathon? Like, why are you doing these lifts? Like,
Right.
what the fuck? Like, this does not look like what I would have. Like, this doesn't look like the strength coach is looking at the run coach's training, and those things should always be working together.
Yeah.
And they should be periodized. So eventually I was just like, screw it. I'll get this training myself and I'll be that strength coach. And also, I love exercise physiology, and I never used to strength train. I never like I was always just like, I want to run. Like, I don't love going to the gym. I'm not like into lifting. Like, I'm not one of those people.
Right.
I'm only into it because it allows me to do more of the thing which I actually like, which is running.
Well, I think that there's this argument, and it does have some weight to it, that as ultra runners and endurance athletes, we're already getting a lot of muscular endurance work in. So,
You
what is
are.
what is right? So, what's the value of strength training? Why do we periodize it? What does that actually involve and look like? And if we are, in fact, already building a lot of muscular endurance just by running up and down mountains or doing 2-hour long runs, what the hell are we supposed to do to address our other needs? And
Yeah.
what are those needs?
Well, it's hugely individual, and this is why having a coach that works with you to assess and address your particular imbalances is key. Like, there's no like copy and paste strength training. Everyone has some runners, like there are some things like I would like most runners to have stronger hips and more active glutes. That's
Yeah.
sort of like I start with hips and glutes kind of as like a base. And then from there, I really work with my specific athletes to figure out like, okay, what are your goals? What phase in training are we at? What potential like weaknesses or areas of imbalances or recurrent injuries do we have? Do we need to do some specific like lower leg training? What time do you have available? What equipment do you have available? There's lots of considerations
Oh,
here,
yeah.
but the overwhelming amount of evidence suggests that strength training can help prevent injuries
Yeah.
and it can help increase running economy
Yep.
and it can help build muscular endurance in addition to the long runs. Also, like, yes, running does help build muscles, but that's assuming that you have perfect and functioning biomechanical patterns. And oftentimes what strength training does is it can help address and correct imbalances or biomechanical inefficiencies so that you get more efficient, so that you're actually building endurance more efficiently when you're running. So that's one of the big ones.
Just maybe shifting the conversation into like the how to and
Yeah.
what we're going to focus on. I think the primary thing that I start with athletes on this subject is your strength training going to support your running?
Yes.
Because if it detracts from it, we've got an issue.
I know there's definitely a type of athlete that likes to, I call it like vanity lifting, where it's like, great, you've got a six pack, but like, what good does that do you? Like, you're allowed to do what you want with your body, but that's just like not going to help make you a better runner. And it's also not neutral. You are taking energy that could be going towards running or towards recovery, and you're putting it towards something that is at best not productive. So it's like kind of, there's no neutral activity. And that's why I really want athletes to be ruthless about curating a routine that supports their ultimate goals. And for most of us, that is running. Yes, there's some people that might have they're doing other things, or they want I have scoliosis and recurrent back issues. So I do some strength training to help me not be in pain when I sit and things like that. So, but there are other reasons to strength training, but don't do things that undermine your running is like the number one mistake I see runners make.
So would that be just like lifting when it's like weights that are too heavy, or like sessions that make you super sore?
Yeah, so you need to make sure that your running workouts aren't compromised by the weightlifting. So reduce the intensity so that you can maintain your running. You're a runner, not a weightlifter. And if you're sore and tired, particularly going into workouts and long runs, that's no good.
Should you be sore though? Like, how do we judge whether or not we're getting enough of
You can be
stress?
sore. Soreness is fine, but I mean, you shouldn't be wrecked. From your
I shouldn't have trouble walking down
shouldn't have
the
trouble
stairs.
walking down the stairs ideally. Sometimes like after you take some time off, yeah, those first couple sessions are going to be a little tough. 1 or 2 days of a little bit of soreness, not a huge issue. But when I see athletes when we persistently have to rearrange our training to accommodate strength, it's like, all right, what's the point here? Like, if you just like going to the gym, that's fine. But we really need to be aligned on the fact that like your weightlifting is detracting from the running, and that's a choice. So another mistake I see is that athletes often will, on the other side of things, lift too light. So it's fine, particularly for beginner runners, beginner weightlifters, to start with low rates and higher reps to build endurance. But the primary goal of weightlifting training for runners should be to build strength and power. So your 1 rep max is the heaviest load that you can successfully lift just once. And most resistance training will primarily prescribe reps based on different percentages of sort of like that max lift. And a lot of times runners, because like I feel anxious and I'm weird in the gym too, I get it, I don't feel totally comfortable there. But if runners self-select their weights, they oftentimes aren't lifting heavy enough.
That is me in a nutshell.
I know. And this was actually studied. So in a 2022 systematic review published in the journal Sports Medicine, study participants chose loads equal to an average of 53% of their max weight across exercises, which when used for 5 to 15 reps could increase strength train gains for novices, but not for more advanced weightlifters. So as you advance, you do have to be more and more intentional about increasing that weight and changing up the movements. So you typically want to be working at about 70% of higher of that 1 rep max with sets of 8 reps or less, depending on the movement. On the other side, I see a lot of runners who lift too heavy. It's You don't need to be able to lift a Kia Sorento over your head to be a good runner. Lifting heavy is extremely buzzy. I know everyone's talking about it with lots of studies showing that it can help everything from hormone health to bone health and running economy. My 10 cents as a strength coach is that that is only something that more advanced athletes with gym experience and expertise should do. And it's best to do it under the guidance of a strength coach who can see you in person, because form is so, so important when you're lifting heavy. And you will only get the benefits of lifting heavy in the context of adequate nutrition, adequate recovery. You can't just throw lifting heavy into a pile of things in your life and expect it to reap all these benefits.
Right.
Because I would say it's like kind of a high risk, high reward activity. And I don't think a lot of athletes are always well positioned for that high risk side of things, right?
Yeah, nor do they have the expertise or the experience or the awareness to understand like exactly when to do this, when it could be valuable, when it could really hurt. If we're just kind of like throwing, eggs at the wall and seeing which ones don't break, you don't want to be the one that breaks.
No.
So it's so much better to be cautious.
And it's also not the only way to improve all of those things. There are lower risk ways to improve your bone health, lower
100%.
risk ways to augment your hormone health. There are lower risk ways to improve your running economy. So like if you want to lift heavy, go with God, but like that is not what I am currently working with my athletes in the context of virtual periodized strength and run coaching.
So can we talk about lifting as cardio?
Oh my God, I can't even with this. So
I'm having a moment myself in coaching this week, so I think this would be really helpful.
Okay,
for me.
great. Exclusively doing high reps of low weight with little rest is basically a cardio workout. So athletes, runners, skip the HIIT training and classes like body pump that use non-specific high rep, low weight workouts, and obviously CrossFit falls into that category as well. AMRAP or EMOM hard circuit workouts try to combine the physiological demands of a track workout and a gym workout. Runners are already doing the running bit, so you only need the latter. So it becomes increasingly important for runners to isolate what you actually need more of, which is the strength and muscle development portion of things, and not the tiring your heart out and tiring out your aerobic system portion of things.
And is lifting, like, do you consider that to be a cardio?
No.
At all?
No, it should not be. Those things should be really
aerobic fitness.
No, and it should not. Yeah,
right.
Because then you're not training the right thing. Like if you're able to do it, like we should be lifting hard enough that it's like an anaerobic process.
Yeah.
So if you're lifting light enough that it becomes cardio, you're kind of like working too hard and not hard enough simultaneously.
Makes sense.
So you don't need to be doing these hour-long classes to build strength. You can see huge improvements in just 2 to 3 20 or 30-minute sessions a week.
Yeah, that's the bread and butter.
Bread and butter.
2 6-minute sessions a week.
Yep. Oh my God. I can't with this guy. He's doing like 5 push-ups a day. Do you think I could beat you in arm wrestling?
No.
Who would win in a fight?
I'm doing 40-pound press up. I'm feeling pretty good right now.
All right.
Yeah,
Do you
I
think
do
you could
my
lift?
2 workouts
Could you
a week.
squat, Bowie?
I'm on a strength taper. I'm periodized.
That's true. You do have a coach guiding your strength. Do you think you could bench press Bowie?
She smells too bad. I wouldn't want to pick her up.
So let's talk about when to lift. And this is another thing that I think it becomes so important for runners. Runners should be scheduling their hard strength days. Many runners try to schedule their strength days on rest days or after an easy run, which is how you turn a rest day or an easy day into a moderate or a hard day. Our goal is always to keep easy days easy and hard days hard. So lift after workouts or endurance runs and not recovery runs, potentially on long run days, but depending on the athlete, depending on how we're periodizing training, depending on their experience level, health, a lot of other things. I usually don't recommend strength training after long runs because I find that tends to be a little too much stimulus for most people. Mm-hmm. But if we are looking for a day where we need to add in strength, that can sometimes be an option. Again, sometimes super individual.
Those weekend days too, there's more time availability.
Yeah.
I think a rule that I really go for with this is like if you do that hard running session in the morning, keep it to at least 3 hours between when you do the running workout and when you do the strength work.
We'll talk a little bit about timing and order of things as well. So keep hard days hard, easy days easy. Also, don't wear your running shoes to the gym. So when you are thinking of footwear for strength training, I mean, if you're wearing Hoka's or a carbon shoe or like, Jesus Christ, whenever I see people wearing trail shoes in the gym, I'm just like, oh my God. You need a lower stack height shoe that has a firm sole to really help stabilize you. That's going to really help with your balance and your proprioception and really allowing you to push into the floor without unnecessary movement. I actually do some of my strength movements in my sock feet so I can get better connection and
What about
stabilization.
in your Birkenstock clogs?
I'm going to say no clog.
No
Are you doing
clogs?
strength training in your clogs?
I'm gonna have to get
My
strength
God,
training
you
shoes
guys,
now. Come
you
on,
can't wear Birkenstocks in the gym, you
They're
old
so
lady.
sturdy.
My God.
In my home gym,
Jesus
in the comfort of my own home.
It's embarrassing. I can't believe you're saying this into a microphone.
It's just a joke.
Oh my God. He's wearing clogs. He wears them in the shower, I bet. So think of yourself
My
doing a
planters.
squat. Imagine doing a squat. Your weight should be evenly distributed throughout your foot, right? Like thinking of like 5 points of contact in your foot. If you're wearing running shoes, which tend to have a lot of extra padding, particularly in the heel, the foam will collapse as the load increases and can rock you backwards. So lifting shoes, sock feet will help promote better form, and that'll help prevent injury, according to a study from the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research.
Nice.
Also, we'll talk a little bit more specifically about periodization in a second, but it's important to change things up and to evolve your program. Again, if you hire a coach, they will do all of this for you, which is nice.
Right. Like if you repeat the same workouts every week on week, like, you know, the classic, like, mountain legs,
Yeah.
mountain legs, like, great. Those are really good exercises. But if you do them every single week, twice a week, for weeks and months on end, I mean, you're going to max out what the actual gains are that you can make from those.
Yeah.
You need to be able to shift around. Something that I've noticed in my strength training is I only did maybe like 1 or 2 weeks with those.
Yeah.
And it was for like a very different purpose than what previously other coaches had prescribed to me, which was pretty cool. Like to learn that, one, certain exercises have multiple different outcomes
Right.
attached to them and can be used at multiple different times, but also there can't be this attachment to certain workouts and the association that those are the only ones you can do.
That's what your
create
blankie is for,
the
not your
gains
strength
that you
routine.
need.
It's
So-
not an emotional support barbell.
Right.
You know? Grow up and get a pug like the rest of us.
Yeah, so change it up and don't hold on
Yeah.
to, dogmatic beliefs around like what exact routines
Yeah.
work best.
Your body responds to variety. All of our body does. And knocking out the same exercises week after week without ever progressing and changing anything up is going to essentially guarantee a plateau. So if you're actually trying to strength train, aka create strength in your muscular system, you need to progress your exercises in order to see changes and particularly benefits in your running training. We call this the principle of progressive overload, which is where you have to gradually increase the weight, frequency, or number of repetitions in order to continue seeing results. So whether it's from that or just variety in your training plan, you need to make the exercises progressively more challenging. That doesn't mean everything has to become a plyo or doing burpee, super dynamic, complex movements. Adding weight, adding reps, it does have to evolve in some way, and depending on what outcome you want, that will guide how you evolve it.
I think we already mentioned this, but it can't hurt to mention it again. Rest days are for rest, not for lifting.
Rest doesn't mean you're just resting from running. It means you're resting. I see a lot of athletes try to squeeze in a lot of additional activity on their rest days, which undermines remember, it's not a rest day, it's an adaptation day. If you're not doing nothing, that's actually when your body is doing the most. And if you start papering over that with strength and power yoga and like horseback riding and gravel racing, you're just undermining your ability to recover. So let's talk a little bit about how to periodize your strength training into different phases.
So how many phases are there? 4?
3.
3.
There are 3 phases.
No taper phase.
Well,
Does that
that's in
count?
the third phase.
That's the third phase.
Yep.
Got it.
So your first phase is the stability phase, and this is the foundational phase that's really focused on correcting muscle imbalances and preventing injuries. So General strength, I would define, is a basic ability to lift weights. It's like a fundamental proficiency that allows you to do training movements without focusing on very heavy weights, explosivity, overall difficulty, or crazy complicated exercises. Like a power clean, that would be an example of a complicated movement that you don't need to be doing in your base training. Injury resilience places importance on one of lifting's biggest benefits to runners, which is injury prevention. Weightlifting increases the toughness of your connective tissues, ligaments, tendons, bones, muscles, and joints, and we love that. So the stability or base building phase is when you build that capacity.
It's also when you get to form the strength training habit.
Yes,
I love it.
So many athletes, they're like, okay, I've decided to start strength training. I have to start super fucking hard, super fucking heavy, and with super fucking complex movements.
Well, I think this is one of the big issues when we follow certain influencers on the internet who are promoting, this is the hour-long routine that I do, or this is my silver bullet.
Yeah.
2-hour strength workout that I
Ooh.
do. I mean, I've heard some ridiculous things from people on podcasts over the last 6 months to a year about their strength work. And as a coach who actually works with busy athletes and has been for 7 years, it's not it's not possible for people to do.
Not only is it not possible, it's counterproductive.
It's
Again,
right.
It just becomes
doesn't make
vanity.
sense.
It's
Right.
emotional support weightlifting.
No, but it's an issue because people in positions of power are influencing other people who don't have the knowledge. Hopefully they listen to this podcast to make better decisions, and they think to be effective at strength training, I have to do all of this, and it's complicated, it's heavy, I need a ton of equipment, the barrier to entry is huge. And if I don't nail it exactly right, I'm not gonna get to where I want to be. And that's just fundamentally wrong. These stability phases are pretty easy. They're not that challenging, but the point isn't to be challenging. The point is to introduce the exercises. The point is to promote the fundamental proficiencies of doing those tasks, and also to build the habits, to find the best, when we go back to zooming in and zooming out, finding the best patterns in the parts of the week where these fit with your training and how you respond.
Right.
It's a lot of information gathering.
Totally. And a big mistake that runners will make is being inconsistent in their strength training, which actually really increases your risk of injury. So we want to avoid that. Oftentimes, the go big or go home crowd, they're just going to go home. So go medium and stay there would be my very non-sexy slogan about strength work.
Yeah.
So in your stability or base phase, you want to include balance work, core strengthening, single leg movements, and thinking of targeting those bigger muscle groups like the glutes. So sessions here probably can be 20, 30 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week because it is lighter and lower weight, using body weight or lighter weights. Usually this is in the zone of we're doing 12 to 15 reps, maintaining perfect form as always, which is, again, ideally work with use some sort of instruction or expert to help guide your form, because lifting with poor form is worse than not lifting at all. So this phase is usually going to last about 4 to 6 weeks, and potentially longer depending on the athlete if there's a risk of injury. And this is usually where I incorporate a lot of exercises like dead bug, planks, flutter kicks, single leg deadlifts, using the Mobo board, really looking on on those, again, stability, balance-oriented exercises, and really thinking of using the limbs like levers and training that deep core and trunk.
Yeah, I think a lot about when I advise athletes what routines to pick up in this phase of strength is the stability of the pelvis and the spine.
Yep.
Which is commonly overlooked,
Yeah.
I think, in a lot of running specific stuff. Man, the dead bug, that's a new exercise to me for the last 3 months.
I've seen you doing your exercise ball dead bugs.
Kills me. It also reminds me of how tight my hamstrings are.
Yeah. So the second phase is the strength phase. And so this is after you've laid down that foundation of general strength and injury prevention. Strength training periodization means that we need to transition to more race specific or objective specific weightlifting. So the goal here is to evolve to focus on more speed, economy, and fast twitch responsiveness.
Just to be clear, in the stability phase, this would be typically when an athlete's addressing more of their weaknesses.
Yeah. Yep.
Earlier on in a
Yep.
year, earlier on in like a build for a big event.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe if they're doing like a specific like aerobic build, it could also be paired with like potentially VO2 max.
Yeah.
I would rather see strength with VO2 max training, but I would want to pair those things in an athlete that had already been consistently strength training for a year, because
Yeah.
otherwise you might have those two stimuli fighting against each other. So like everything here is really
It's complicated.
dependent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the strength phase prioritizes explosivity and really teaches your nervous system how to create force quickly. So you're going to accomplish this by lifting more quickly, adding weight, and potentially introducing explosive lifts, plyometrics. So that's actually what that's going to do, is going to help you better access the deep neurons and fast twitch muscle fibers that you need for mid-race surges, and also getting more out of your speed workouts, right? Like, it's not just about what we do on race day. The strength training helps us train better, and that helps us race better. So explosive lifting also has a side benefit of improving your coordination of both your slow and fast twitch muscle fibers while you're running. So it's that type 1 and type 2 muscle fiber recruitment that's so important in this phase. This helps you become more energy efficient, or like improves your running economy. It can help improve your running form and make the use of those form cues more effective. Specifically, like when we see athletes who struggle to maintain that forward lean, a lot of times it's because the glutes aren't engaged as well as they should be. Potentially someone has a hip drop, so their stride's not very strong, so we need to be doing hip strength to help correct that. So you can run more efficiently and have an increased capacity for top end speed. It helps, in this phase, builds on the earlier stability foundation, and the strength phase will introduce heavier weights. This is when I like to build in exercises like deadlift, squats, lunges, and the goal here is to increase muscle mass. It's to enhance fatigue resistance and power. And this is where I like to potentially break things down into 2 to 3 sessions a week, maybe 30 to 40, maybe upwards of 50, depending on the athlete. Sessions a week are recommended. So
Wow.
this is where you might have more challenging weights for 6 to 8 repetitions. Never going to failure. We are never going to failure. You should always be able to do several more repetitions. I also like to add in Romanian deadlifts, Bulgarian split squats. I don't know why these things are Romanian or Bulgarian. I meant to Google that. I've always wondered,
Right? Why
like,
is
what's
the ball
going on in
Swiss?
like Eastern Europe that they're like getting super into strength training.
Well, you know, they like powerlifting in this.
Apparently,
Eastern
they seem
Bloc
very
countries.
strong.
You know, I think, I'll speak from my personal experience, because it to me, it sounds very overwhelming to hear 45 to 60 minutes of strength 2 to 3 times a week. I hear that and I'm like, oh my God, how the hell am I going to have time for that? I actually just finished that, periodized phase of training with my coach. I did it with 2 20-minute sessions a week, and I was sore
Doesn't have
after
to-
those
yeah.
sessions. So, you know, depending on your time availability, I think in the running space, a rule that I have always used, you may relate to this or not, but the minimum of effective dose
Yes,
to create the gains while not disrupting your ability to do
Correct.
the running training.
Yep. We're not doing this for like to get a beach bod. We're doing this to get better at running. That is what my area of expertise is.
Yeah.
If you want anything else, go with God. That's not me. You know,
Sure.
like I can help you be healthier and more athletic, but like my primary goal and area of expertise here is how do we apply strength training into running training so that we can run better. That is the whole point.
Reach
That
goals.
is my focus. Yes.
Yeah.
So the final phase is the power phase, and that's where we can start to incorporate plyometrics and even more explosive movements to continue to develop that speed and power. Sometimes this is also known as the peaking or taper phase. So this is really where the periodized training builds to in the phase of training that prepares you to perform. So it's the final phase of training at the end of your season, and it will typically prioritize power and force production, running economy and efficiency, and strategic rest so that you're ready to race. So this is where some athletes might incorporate Olympic lifts and plyometrics to help utilize the stored elastic energy and reactive forces of their muscles and tendons. And this is for a slightly more advanced athlete here, your workload might peak here and then decrease, right? Like as we go into race week, obviously we are tapering strength as well as running volume so that you're strong and rested for your upcoming race. It'll also keep your central nervous system tuned up, primed for speed, and ready to deliver that PR, right? Like, because we're not just strength training to build muscle mass. It helps our muscle groups work better together. It helps our brain work better with our muscles. It helps our reactivity get better. Sometimes I'll incorporate exercises like box jumps, potentially like a hip thruster kettlebell swing to help teach the body to recruit maximum muscle fibers quickly and help improve that sufficiency. That running efficiency. And usually sessions here are going to be like 30, maybe 45 minutes, still keeping repetitions low so that we can really focus on that speed development so that you're still like, we're leaving it out there primarily in training. We're not going to failure in the gym. The running is still going to be better than the running is still the priority. So this phase usually lasts about 2 to 3 weeks with 2 to 3 weeks with strength training reduced in the week or couple weeks leading up to a race, depending on what the objective is.
Yeah, I'm in this power phase in my new strength.
How's that going? Is your booty sore?
No.
Not at all?
Well, what I'm learning is, and not through this podcast, but I think we need to get some weights that are a little heavier.
I know, we
for
do.
Me. We shouldn't
Your birthday's coming up. Can I get you a weights?
No. Can you get yourself some more weights? No. That's the last thing I want for my birthday. But I appreciate it.
Did I hear you want weights for your birthday? You want weights and another dog for your birthday? You want weights, another dog, and tickets to see the Eras Tour in Vancouver for your birthday.
I could go for number 3. I could do number 3.
Dog number 3?
No.
Oh.
A good concert. That'd be fun.
Eras Tour it is.
Even a little T Swift. I think that's who you're talking to.
Yes.
Who about?
The Eras Tour.
I don't know. I'm doing this phase, and I actually really like it because I've noticed in the past, going back to patterns, going back to the awareness we build in training, that I do better with explosive movements. It also lends
you are pretty
to
fast twitch.
My athletic background. Fortunately, I've never been slow, but I've not always been good at going fast for long periods of time.
Yeah.
So the plyometrics and the fast movements, they help. For me, that's a strength. So it helps me really feel like in tune with my body going into an event. But a curiosity that I have, because like if I'm running, so like my upcoming event is a 50 miler.
Right.
It's not very explosive if we really talk about it. It's not like trying to run a 400.
No.
Or,
Well, that's not what I'm talking about here.
Right, but
to be clear, I don't train sprinters, and I am unqualified to recommend what sort of lifts are the most productive for sprinting.
I guess then what I hear, and so maybe this would be a question that a listener would have, because I wasn't clear about it. Maybe you could shed some more light as the more expert of the two of us. When we're talking about wanting to train for those explosive movements, we're still doing that in the context of the actual events that we're doing, right?
Usually, yeah. I mean, because the kick at the end of a 50 can still be pretty explosive. Like,
sure.
At the upper end of the sport, we are running, like you will run every step of that 50.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I can see that. I think...
But, this is why it's so important. I'm also speaking to our 10K runners, our marathoners. This isn't trail and ultra specific. And that's why it's important to have a strength coach that understands the demands of your specific sport. Because I will train the strength training that I assign for someone training for a half marathon is going to be really different than someone training for 100K.
Right, just because the duration of those events.
And similarly, if they're training for the Javelina 100K versus the, jungle in Mexico 100K.
Right, or like a mountain race versus...
Yeah. Does it reward more speed and economic development, or do we really need to get bomb-proof quads? Those training regimens are going to look really different.
Will the training phase lengths look different then because of that?
A little bit, just because with, if you're training for a steeper or longer event, that's going to be more specific. So we're going to be spending more time in a specific phase of training and less time in the less specific, sort of like speed and economy development. But if you are training for a flat, fast ultra or like a marathon, more of your training is more specific just because of the nature of the training.
And what about if you're like an athlete? So like 100 milers, right? Like maybe we get 2 A races a year.
Yeah.
If we're lucky. But if you're that like marathon runner, you could do 3, 4, I think kind of 3, maybe really perform well at 3 marathons. Like, would you kind of repeat these phases?
Yeah, and I would even for an ultra runner, because we, even if I only do 100-mile race a year, but I have several cycles like doing like, all right, let's develop VO2 max, and then let's develop threshold, because we raise the VO2 max, raise the threshold. The strength training should work in concert with that at every step of the way. And
so like in the context of a year, like say you are training for 100 miler, you're going to do Leadville next year. You're not necessarily doing that, but like if you were.
Yeah.
But then en route to that race, you're going to do UTMB Chianti. So like we might start with stability, then we might go to strength, and then power for Chianti.
I think to just make this simple,
and then repeat.
All of this will look different for every athlete depending on their background, goals, ability, equipment, time availability. It's pretty hard to answer that question in a specific way because it will be so specifically tailored to each athlete, which is why I'm giving people a framework as opposed to presenting a strength training plan.
Right. I'm just trying to understand.
It's very variable.
Okay, so you won't necessarily repeat like certain phases in the exact same order. It's more like what the needs are of the person.
Correct. Just like how your training would. Just like how your running training would be different. Like if you're running for hundreds in a year, your training will look different than if you're running 1. So your strength should look different as well.
Right, but I think maybe just to put a little more context to it, like if you're training for Chianti and you're also training for Leadville, 2 races, big races at different parts of the year, you're going to hit all the main energy systems training for both races.
Right.
So
you'll hit all phases.
So presumably
you
would probably do that with strength too.
Yeah.
That's what I was asking.
Yes.
Sorry, I might have been unclear. But I don't know. I like that they're in concert with each other.
Ideally. And this is, I think, the thing that people mess up is they do too much or not enough and they don't evolve it. And I guess if I could leave people with anything else, it's like work with a coach. I know that like I don't mean this to just be like an advertisement for us, but like this stuff is it can be challenging to wrap your head around. And understanding, like, trying to have everything be for a reason, because if there isn't an intention behind it, then it's very easy for it to draw from the energy that should be going to running.
I think that's such a good point, right? Like, understand the intentionality behind any part of your training.
Yeah.
If you can know and understand that, and you can successfully guide yourself in that process, wonderful. But if you have a doubt about that, it's way better to, enlist the help of an expert, because I can tell you as an athlete who didn't have a coach for a long time and then got a coach, the gains were much quicker and more rapid when I finally, took that leap and made that investment in myself. I'll never go back.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
I would say just like bet on yourself, strength train. And if you're currently strength training, make sure that it is supportive of the running, or be honest with yourself about why you're doing things.
All right. Hope you guys found this helpful.
A lot of information there.
Such good information, though. Thank you, Zoe. Microcosmcoaching.com. We would love some hot or not topics.
Yeah.
Get at us.
Or let us know if you're just like totally tired of them.
Yeah. We could always do more of, what did we call that segment?
Would you rather?
Would you rather? Yeah, that was fun. All right, guys. Thank you. Microcosmcoaching@gmail.com. Microcosm-coaching.com. We'll see you next week.